My name is Alex Carter. For years, I worked at the same company, giving my blood, sweat, and time. I wasn't rich, I wasn't powerful, but I was loyal. The kind of man who believed that if you worked hard, you'd be rewarded. I was wrong. There was one man at that company who hated me, Richard Hale. My so-called mentor. He smiled in meetings, shook my hand in front of the team, but behind closed doors, he was plotting against me. He wanted my projects, my reputation, my position. And he got it. One Friday afternoon, just before a major product launch, he framed me. He forged emails, planted fake mistakes in my work, and by Monday, I was fired. My name dragged through the mud. My career destroyed. Richard thought he won. I lost my job, my savings, and even my girlfriend left me when she realized I couldn't provide anymore. I had nothing left, except my anger. At first, I drowned myself in self-pity. Weeks passed. But then, something changed. Sitting in my tiny apartment, I realized something. Richard hadn't just taken my job. He'd taken my dignity. And I was going to take it back. That night, my revenge began. I spent months quietly gathering information. Richard loved money more than anything, so I followed the trail. Offshore accounts, shady side deals, illegal kickbacks. He wasn't just corrupt, he was sloppy. I created a digital file. Evidence of every crime he'd committed. But I didn't send it to the police, not yet. That would have been too easy. Instead, I leaked small pieces of evidence to the press. Anonymous tips. Enough to raise suspicion, but not enough to destroy him. Richard panicked. He scrambled, lied, bribed, and in the process, exposed even more. While he fought the media, I went for his friends. The investors who trusted him. I revealed his lies to them one by one. Within months, they pulled their money. His empire began to crumble. But I wasn't finished. The final blow came at the company's annual board meeting, the same company that had thrown me away. I walked in, clean suit, calm face, holding a thick folder. The board recognized me instantly. Richard sneered, thinking he'd humiliate me again. Instead, I dropped the folder on the table. Inside, every secret, every crime, every dollar stolen. And then I pressed play, on a recording, Richard drunk, bragging about how he set me up, laughing that Alex Carter will never recover. Silence filled the room. His smile disappeared. And just like that, Richard Hale was finished. Security dragged him out as the board voted to remove him permanently. Hours later, news stations ran the story. Corporate executive exposed in shocking scandal. And me? I didn't get my old job back. I got something better. Respect. Truth. And the satisfaction of knowing that Richard finally understood. He thought he won. But my revenge had only just begun.
The days after my firing blurred together. I'd wake up late in the afternoon, sit on the couch, and stare at the same four walls. Food delivery boxes piled in the corner. Unpaid bills gathered on the counter. The silence in my apartment felt heavier than any noise. I had always been a man with purpose, with routine. Suddenly, I had neither. The world moved on without me. Former colleagues stopped returning my calls. Friends I thought I had suddenly had other commitments. My name was poisoned now, associated with fraud and failure. Richard had not only destroyed my career, he had erased me from the map. And Anna, she was gone too. One evening, I walked by our favorite cafe. Through the glass, I saw her sitting at a corner table. Across from her, Richard, his hand on hers, his smile wide, confident. She looked happy, freer than I had ever seen her with me. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. That moment cut deeper than losing my job. He hadn't just stolen my career. He'd stolen the woman I loved. I stumbled home, collapsed in a bed, and for the first time in years, I cried. It felt like the end of everything. But rock bottom has a strange way of changing a man. The pain, the humiliation, the rage, it burned inside me like acid. I could let it consume me, or I could use it. That night, I pulled out my old laptop. I opened every backup, every archive I had from my years of Halcyon Dynamics. Richard thought he erased me. He thought I'd roll over and disappear. But he was wrong. I spent days combing through files, logs, emails. At first, I was just looking for proof of my innocence. But then I started noticing things. Little details that didn't add up. Unexplained payments. Hidden folders. Encrypted accounts. Richard had been sloppy. The deeper I dug, the more I realized Richard wasn't just ambitious. He was corrupt. Embezzlement. Fraud. Kickbacks from vendors. Deals with shell companies. He'd been bleeding money from the company for years, covering his tracks just enough to avoid suspicion. And suddenly, a thought clicked in my head. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This was about justice. About balance. He thought he won, but I was going to show him what real defeat looked like. I didn't have money, allies, or a job, but I had time. And time, I had discovered, could be a powerful weapon. So I created a plan. Step 1, gather everything. Build a digital dossier of Richard's crimes. Not just the surface-level leaks, but the kind of evidence no one could ignore. Step 2. Break his foundation. His allies, his investors, his reputation. Step 3. Deliver the final blow in a way he'd never see coming. It wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be easy. But revenge rarely is. I wasn't the man Richard had betrayed anymore. That man had died in the boardroom the day he mouthed the words, "I won." The man who rose from the ashes was something else entirely. I wasn't going to fight him head on. I was going to dismantle him piece by piece. And by the time I was finished, Richard Hale would beg for the mercy he had never given me. Revenge isn't loud. It isn't dramatic, not at first. It's quiet, patient, like a hunter waiting in the dark. I spent weeks turning my tiny apartment into a war room. Papers taped to the walls, strings connecting dots, folders stacked high with evidence. My laptop screen glowed late into the night, my eyes bloodshot, my hands trembling from too much coffee. Every detail mattered. Every email Richard had sent, every contract he'd signed, every dollar that had gone missing. He had gotten arrogant. That was his weakness. People like Richard always think they're untouchable. They get sloppy. They leave trails. And I was following them. I hacked into his cloud accounts, carefully, never from my own network. I traced shell companies that led to offshore accounts. I discovered secret deals with politicians and bribes disguised as consulting fees. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. But raw data wasn't enough. I needed people, so I started reaching out to the forgotten ones. Employees Richard had crushed, just like me. People who had been blacklisted, fired, humiliated. At first, they didn't trust me. They thought I was another con man, another setup. But once I showed them the files, once I reminded them of their own scars, the anger came back. Slowly, they joined me. Not a team in the traditional sense, but allies. Sources. Ghosts in the system willing to whisper secrets in the dark. There was Angela, a former accountant who Richard had thrown under the bus to cover a missing $2 million. She still had backup drives. There was Devin, a logistics manager fired after he questioned Richard's side contracts. He knew about the warehouses where shipments went missing. And there was Clara, my ace. She had worked as Richard's personal assistant for 5 years. She knew his habits, his weaknesses, his passwords. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. But revenge isn't just about evidence. It's psychological. You don't just break a man's career. You break his confidence, his sanity. So I tested him. Anonymous emails with vague threats. Someone knows. Unmarked packages delivered to his office. An old photo of his first company, circled in red ink. A USB drive filled with blank files, except one word, thief. Nothing traceable. Nothing direct. Just enough to make him sweat. And it worked. Through Clara, I learned he'd been snapping at his staff. He'd started drinking more. He'd hired private security for his home. Every move I made, no matter how small, was pushing him closer to the edge. But I wasn't satisfied. No, I wanted him to feel what I'd felt. Powerless, humiliated, broken. So I waited and watched until one night, Clara texted me. He's hosting a private dinner with investors. Tomorrow. Big deal. He's bragging it will secure his empire. That was the opening I needed. For weeks, I had been holding on to a bomb, a digital one. Encrypted files, undeniable proof of his embezzlement, his bribes, his theft. All neatly packaged, ready to leak. But leaking it outright would have been too easy. No, it had to be theatrical. It had to hurt. So I planted it. The night of the dinner, while Richard raised his glass and promised his investors a bright future, their phones buzzed one by one. Anonymous messages, files, screenshots, bank transfers, names, dates, signatures. I wasn't in the room, but I could imagine it. The confused looks, the whispers, the phones being passed around. Richard's confident smile cracking as he realized something was wrong. By the end of the night, half of his investors had walked out. The others demanded answers he couldn't give. And me? I was just getting started. For the first time since losing everything, I felt alive again. But this wasn't the end. Not even close. This was just the first crack in his empire. The real destruction was still to come. There's a saying, if you want to kill a king, don't miss. I didn't plan to miss. Richard had built an empire of glass, shiny and towering, but fragile at the core. All it needed was the right amount of pressure, and cracks would spread everywhere. After the investor dinner disaster, he tried to save face. Public statements, fake smiles, promises of misunderstandings. But I could see through the act. His empire wasn't a fortress. It was a house of cards, and I was pulling one card at a time. The financial hit. Angela, the accountant, gave me access to backup ledgers Richard thought he had buried. Numbers don't lie, especially when millions of dollars are disappearing into shell companies. I sent those files anonymously to the IRS and Financial Crimes Unit. Not all at once, piece by piece, drip by drip, so every week there was a new fire Richard had to put out. When government investigators circle, investors run. When investors run, the media smells blood. And once the media bites, there's no stopping the feeding frenzy. Within a month, whispers turned into headlines. Fraud allegations against rising business mogul. Whistleblowers speak out against Richard Hale. Empire built on lies. The social hit. Devin helped me with the warehouses. He still had contacts with workers who hated Richard's guts. Through them, I leaked photos of hidden shipments, documents proving Richard had been laundering money through bogus logistics contracts. The story spread like wildfire online. Social media tore him apart. Memes, hashtags, endless threads. People he'd never met were calling him a crook, a con man, a parasite. His polished public image, once untouchable, was now a punchline. The personal hit. But my favorite strike? That came through Clara. She knew everything about his life. His passwords, his calendar, his habits, and his secrets. Richard had always prided himself on being a family man. The photos, the charity events, the staged interviews with his wife and kids. But Clara told me the truth. The mistresses, the offshore trips disguised as business retreats. I didn't leak it outright. Oh no, that would have been too merciful. Instead, I let his wife find out first. An anonymous package left at her doorstep. Photos, receipts, flight records. The kind of evidence that shatters not just trust, but an entire home. Within weeks, divorce papers were filed. And when the media caught wind of it, Richard's image as the loyal family man went up in flames. Watching him fall, I didn't need to be in the room to see it. Clara gave me updates. Richard's once pristine office had turned into chaos. He screamed at employees. He drank in the middle of meetings. He fired loyal staff in paranoid outbursts. The man who once strutted like a king now looked over his shoulder everywhere he went. He hired more guards, changed his phone number weekly, but it didn't matter. He couldn't stop me, because I wasn't just attacking his business. I was dismantling his entire life. And the best part? He didn't even know who was behind it. The breaking point. Then came the boardroom coup. I had timed it perfectly. The same day, the federal investigators froze one of Richard's offshore accounts. I leaked internal emails. Proof he had manipulated board votes to secure his position as CEO. By the time he walked into that boardroom, half the directors were ready to slit his throat metaphorically. The other half were too scared to defend him. He yelled. He threatened. He reminded them who built the empire. But they weren't listening anymore. When the vote came, it was swift. Unanimous. Richard Hale, removed as CEO. His crown stripped. His empire collapsing around him. I watched the live stream of his resignation speech. A shaky man hiding behind trembling words. The once great king of the city reduced to a pitiful shadow. And yet, as satisfying as it was, I knew this wasn't the end. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't just about taking someone's power. It's about making sure they can never rise again. Richard thought he'd lost everything, but I still had one card left to play. The final strike. The one that would bury him forever. Richard thought losing his company was the end. He thought being humiliated in front of his investors and the press was rock bottom. He was wrong, because rock bottom was still waiting for him. The trap. See, destroying his career wasn't enough for me. I wanted him ruined, bankrupt, alone, hunted. So I set the trap. Remember all those offshore accounts? The shell companies? The missing millions? I had enough evidence to bury him in prison for life. But instead of going straight to the authorities, I played it smart. I leaked just enough to keep the feds circling. Let them smell blood, let Richard sweat. Meanwhile, I sent the real files, the complete package, to a journalist hungry for a Pulitzer. A man whose entire career had been built on exposing corruption. I didn't give him my name. Didn't need to. I was just the ghost in the machine. Within days, the story broke. Front page. Headline news. Every channel, every platform, every voice screaming the same thing. Richard Hale was a criminal. The collapse. Overnight, everything crumbled. His accounts were frozen. His assets seized. His friends in politics and business cut ties instantly, denying they had ever supported him. The vultures circled. Lawsuits piled up. Former employees came forward, emboldened by the chaos, each one with their own story of abuse, fraud, or betrayal. Richard's carefully crafted empire, the one he stole from me and countless others, was gone. And the best part? He had no idea who had orchestrated it. Face to face. But I wasn't finished. No, I wanted him to see me. To know it was me who had pulled every string. So I arranged it. Clara lured him out, told him she had something he needed to see. She brought him to an empty warehouse on the edge of the city, one of the very same buildings he had used to launder his dirty money. And that's where I waited. When Richard walked in, he didn't look like the king he once was. His suit was wrinkled. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. He was sweating, trembling, paranoid. "Who are you?" he demanded when he saw me. His voice cracked, no longer commanding, just desperate. I stepped out of the shadows. "Don't you recognize me?" His eyes narrowed, searching, and then realization. "Alex," he whispered. His lips trembled. "You?" "Yes, me." For a moment, he tried to play it off. The arrogance flickered back. "You think you've beaten me? You think this will last? I have friends. I have power. You're nothing without me." I walked closer, my voice steady, calm. "No, Richard, you're nothing. Without your money. Without your lies. Without the people you crushed to climb your way up. You thought you won when you destroyed me. But all you did was light a fire." He lunged forward, rage in his eyes, but the guards I'd hired held him back easily. He wasn't a king anymore. He was just a desperate man clawing at the ruins of his empire. I leaned in close, my words like poison. "This was never about money, never about power. This was about making you feel every ounce of the pain you caused me. You killed my career. You killed my brotherhood with my colleagues. You killed the man I used to be. And now, I've killed you. Not literally. No, death would have been too easy. But when I walked out of that warehouse, leaving Richard screaming in the dark, I knew his life was over. The final blow. 2 weeks later, Richard Hale was arrested. Fraud, embezzlement, racketeering, tax evasion. The list was endless. His face was plastered across every news channel, not as the brilliant businessman he once pretended to be, but as the disgraced criminal he truly was. His wife left him. His kids refused to speak to him. His name became a curse, a warning to anyone who ever thought they could rise by stepping on others. And me? I didn't celebrate. There was no party, no victory dance. Just silence. Because revenge isn't sweet. It doesn't heal wounds. It doesn't bring back what you've lost. But it does something else. It gives you closure. And for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. Richard Hale thought he had destroyed me. But in the end, I destroyed him. And as I walked away from the ashes of his empire, I realized one truth. Sometimes justice doesn't come from the law. Sometimes it comes from the ones you try to bury. When the news broke of Richard Hale's arrest, the world cheered. But me? I just sat alone in my apartment, staring at the TV. The man who once seemed untouchable was now in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face hollow. Reporters screamed his name, cameras flashed, and he looked like a cornered animal caught at last. It should have felt glorious. It should have felt like victory. But instead, it felt quiet. The emptiness of revenge. For years, revenge had been my heartbeat. Every plan, every sleepless night, every whisper in the dark, it was all leading to this. And now that it was over, the silence felt deafening. I looked around my apartment, walls covered in papers, notes, strings connecting Richard's sins. My war room, my obsession. Without him, what was left of me? I wasn't the same man who lost everything years ago. That Daniel, quiet, careful, afraid, had died the night Richard ruined me. What remained was someone else. Someone harder, colder. I had won. But victory hadn't brought peace. It had left scars. The consequences. The allies who had helped me. Angela, Devin, Clara. They all moved on with their lives. Angela got a consulting job again. Devin finally found a company that valued his skills. Clara disappeared into anonymity, escaping the spotlight before the storm reached her. But me? I stayed behind in the wreckage. The government never traced the leaks back to me, but part of me almost wished they had. Maybe then I could have confessed everything. Maybe then I could have unburdened the truth. Instead, I carried it alone. Because revenge doesn't just destroy your enemy. It changes you. Visiting the grave. 1 week after Richard's sentencing, I went somewhere I hadn't gone in years. The cemetery. There was one grave I hadn't visited since the day it was buried under dirt and roses. My brother's. I stood there, staring at his name carved in stone, my hands trembling. "Mike, it's over," I whispered. "He can't hurt anyone else." I made sure of it. The wind blew gently, rustling the leaves, almost as if he was answering me. But standing there, I realized something painful. My revenge hadn't brought him back. His laugh, his stubbornness, his fearless heart, all gone. Forever. Revenge had given me justice, yes, but hadn't healed me. Moving forward, after that day, I tore down the war room. Every paper, every photo, every file. Burned. Gone. Richard Hale was finished. His empire destroyed. His name disgraced. And me? I didn't want to live in his shadow anymore. I started small. A new job at a modest firm. New friends. Slowly, I built a life again. Not on revenge, but on something real. But I never forgot. Because deep down, a part of me would always carry that darkness. The knowledge that I was capable of destroying a man piece by piece. That justice, when denied, could still be taken by force. The final thought. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Richard. About the man who once thought he was a king. I wonder if he thinks of me, rotting in his cell, try to guess the face of the ghost who brought him down. And then I smile. Because he'll never know the full story. He'll never understand how close he was to winning, until I turned everything against him. He thought he won. But in the end, I took my revenge. And that revenge became the only justice that mattered.